The game had been moving with the focused intensity that late innings produce, every pitch carrying more weight, every decision compressed by the scoreboard and the clock, and the 40,000 people who had stayed in their seats precisely because they understood that the eighth inning of a close baseball game is where the afternoon either justifies itself or collapses. And then the umpire called time. Not for a mound visit. Not for a replay review. Not for any of the procedural pauses that baseball absorbs without breaking its rhythm. The umpire called time and then did something that nobody in that stadium, not the players, not the coaches, not the broadcasters, not the fans who had watched thousands of baseball games between them, had seen an umpire do in the eighth inning of a game involving the best player on the planet. He walked directly toward Shohei Ohtani. What followed lasted 4 minutes and contained more drama than most full games produce. A physical search conducted in full view of the stadium. Words delivered at close range, loudly enough to be read on camera if not fully heard from the stands. A Braves manager who seized the moment to demand something that had never been demanded before, the suspension of Shohei Ohtani. A baseball world that watched all of it happen in real time and struggled to process what it was seeing. And then, in the aftermath, a confession. From Ohtani himself. A revelation about what had actually occurred in that eighth inning that reframed the entire incident from the beginning. And an apology, from the umpires, that confirmed what the confession had already made clear. They had gotten it wrong. Completely, consequentially, and publicly wrong. This is how it happened. Context is everything in baseball, and the context of this eighth inning matters. The game had reached the point where every participant, every pitcher, every hitter, every fielder, is operating at the edge of their concentration. The eighth inning is where leads shrink and deficits expand, where one decision reshapes everything that follows. It is the inning where managers earn their salaries and players reveal the depth of their preparation. Ohtani was in that environment, fully present, fully engaged, the way he always is when the game reaches its most consequential phase. His routine in high-leverage situations is one of the most studied and discussed aspects of his approach to baseball. He narrows. He quiets everything external and finds the specific focus that allows him to perform at his highest level precisely when the pressure is greatest. The umpire's decision to call time and approach him in that moment was not a neutral act. It was an interruption of a specific kind, the kind that reaches past the baseball and touches the player inside the uniform. The walk toward Ohtani was deliberate. The umpire covered the distance between his position and Ohtani's with a purposefulness that the players on both sides of the field immediately recognized as significant. This was not a correction of positioning. This was not a quiet word delivered between pitches. This was a formal approach, the kind that signals that something official is about to occur. And then the search began. The search was conducted in the eighth inning of a Major League Baseball game with every camera in the stadium trained on the interaction and 40,000 people watching from the stands. Umpires have the authority to conduct physical inspections of players. The rules permit it. The league has established protocols around it precisely because the authority, while real, is also sensitive. An inspection conducted incorrectly, or without sufficient cause, or in a manner that humiliates rather than investigates, crosses from legitimate officiating into something that requires its own accountability. What the umpire did in searching Ohtani in the eighth inning, the manner of it, the proximity of it, the words delivered at close range and with a volume that those nearby described as a yell, went beyond the clinical neutrality that an inspection is supposed to maintain. The players who were close enough to observe the interaction described the umpire's words as aggressive. Not firm. Not authoritative in the measured way that officiating authority is supposed to be exercised. Aggressive, in the direction, in the tone, in the physical proximity that placed the umpire's face close enough to Ohtani's that the cameras captured the confrontation with an intimacy that felt deeply wrong given the power differential and the public setting. Ohtani stood through it. This needs to be said clearly and without qualification. He stood through a search and a face-to-face confrontation conducted at full volume in the eighth inning of a Major League Baseball game, and he did not flinch, did not argue, did not give the situation anything additional to feed on. He absorbed it with a composure that, under those specific circumstances, was an act of extraordinary self-discipline. The stadium was not composure. The stadium was loud with a displeasure that had no difficulty finding its target. Walt Weiss had been watching from the Braves' dugout. And what he saw, or what he concluded he saw, moved him to step forward with a demand that escalated the incident from a disputed inspection to something that required a response from the league itself. Suspend Shohei. 2 words, delivered publicly, with the confidence of a man who believed the search had found justification for a consequence beyond the game itself. Weiss did not hedge. He did not frame his demand as a question or a concern or a request for further review. He stated it as something he considered obvious, that what the umpire had found, or what Weiss believed the umpire had found, warranted Ohtani's removal not just from this game but from games to come. The demand landed with immediate force. Because demands for the suspension of Shohei Ohtani are not things that exist in the normal vocabulary of a baseball game. The name and the demand sit so far apart in the imagination of anyone who follows the sport that hearing them placed together created a cognitive dissonance that the stadium and the broadcast struggled to process in real time. Players from the Dodgers' dugout responded with the unified energy of a team that had watched something happen to their most important player and was now watching that same player's name attached to a suspension demand from the opposing manager. The temperature in both dugouts climbed. The umpires, who had already placed themselves at the center of the incident, now found themselves managing its expansion. The game remained suspended around the 8th inning's pause, waiting, like everyone else, for a resolution that nobody could yet see. Hours later, Ohtani spoke. And what he revealed about the 8th inning reframed every element of what had occurred: the search, the umpire's words, Weiss's demand, the entire suspended moment in front of 40,000 people. The confession was not an admission of wrongdoing. This is the critical thing to understand about what Ohtani disclosed and how he disclosed it. He was not confirming what the umpire had suspected or what Weiss had demanded action on. He was revealing the actual truth of what had happened in the 8th inning, the specific circumstance, the specific sequence of events, the specific reality that the umpire's search had failed to accurately identify and that Weiss's demand had been built entirely upon a misreading of. Ohtani explained it with the same directness he brings to everything he communicates publicly. Without drama. Without the performance of vindication. Simply, this is what happened, this is what was misunderstood, this is the gap between what the umpire believed and what was actually true. The room that received his words went through something visible and collective, the specific recalibration of people who have been watching a story move in one direction and have just been handed information that reverses the entire frame. Because what Ohtani revealed made clear that the search had been triggered by a misreading. That the words delivered at close volume in the 8th inning had been aimed at a situation that did not exist in the way the umpire believed it did. That Weiss's demand for suspension had been constructed on a foundation that Ohtani's disclosure had just removed entirely. The secret of the 8th inning was not what anyone had assumed. It never is, with Ohtani, because the assumptions people make about him consistently fail to account for the actual complexity of who he is and how he operates. The umpires apologized. In the world of Major League Baseball officiating, this is not a common occurrence. Umpires operate within a culture of institutional confidence. The call was made, the authority was exercised, the game moved forward. Formal apologies require a formal acknowledgement that the authority was misapplied, and formal acknowledgements of that kind carry weight that goes beyond the individual incident. The apology came after the review. After Ohtani's disclosure had been examined against the evidence available, the footage, the accounts from those present, the specific sequence of events in the 8th inning, and found to be accurate. The umpire had conducted a search based on a misreading. The words delivered at close range and high volume had been aimed at a situation that the facts did not support. The entire intervention in the 8th inning had been built on an incorrect foundation. The apology confirmed this. Simply, officially, and with the institutional weight of a league that understood what the 8th inning had cost, in disruption, in public image, in the specific and significant harm of placing Shohei Ohtani at the center of a confrontation that he had done nothing to warrant. Weiss's demand for suspension quietly disappeared into the space where demands go when the facts that generated them turn out not to exist. Strip away the search and the yelling and the suspension demand and the confession and the apology, strip all of it away, and what remains is a simple and important truth about Shohei Ohtani. He was targeted in the 8th inning of a baseball game by an official acting on an incorrect assumption. He was searched publicly and yelled at in front of 40,000 people. He had his name attached to a suspension demand from an opposing manager who believed he had justification that he did not have. And through all of it, through the search and the confrontation and the demand and the suspended moment in front of all those cameras, Ohtani stood still. He did not create additional incident. He did not feed the situation anything it could use. He waited for the truth to do what truth, given enough time and light, always does. It cleared him. Completely. And the people who had been wrong about the 8th inning said so. That is the story. The umpire walked toward the wrong conclusion. Weiss built a demand on the wrong foundation. And Ohtani, as he has done in every situation that has threatened to define him from the outside rather than from within, waited patiently for the outside to catch up with what he already knew.